الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله النبي الكريم اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم وقل رب زدني علما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'd like to welcome everyone to the last class on the fiqh of halal consumption. Inshallah ta'ala, we hope to cover the last few sections. Those of you who have been with us from the beginning would know, inshallah, that today, as you can see on your screens, hopefully, category number three, we left off at seafood. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll start with seafood as a category. We'll get that all the way to completion, and then we will focus on category number four. As you can still see on your slide, on your screens, number four, which will be talking about the practical implications on our lives, what we can do about it, what we can look forward to, and what to expect for the future of halal in America, inshallah. So that's the plan for today's dars. If anyone has any questions, please do keep in mind, we'll try to take questions at the end, but you can write your questions either directly to me privately by selecting who you want to send your message to in the chat box, or just sending it to everyone, and we will take those questions, inshallah, at the end. I do hope to leave some extra room tonight for Q&A. I don't anticipate, inshallah, this last section to reach all the way to 9:15, but Allah knows best, so we'll see where it takes us. My intentions are, however, to end a little early tonight, just so that we can take more of the Q&A. I know in previous classes we didn't have that opportunity. So, but khair, inshallah. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll get started with that last category, so seafood. So just to be clear, we're going to be discussing seafood in light of the Hanafi madhab and sort of the understanding of the Hanafi school with regards to the permissibility of seafood and what animals are considered permissible for consumption's sake. This also, of course, has a lot of discussion, a lot of technical discussion, but for our purposes, we'll condense that very much, inshallah, to the core takeaways of the madhab. We will also briefly address some of the points of the other madhahib, and then lastly, talk about one of the more disputed topics, which is prawns or shrimp, and is it permissible to consume? So inshallah, with that, we'll go ahead and get started. It's important to us, for all of us, to understand, particularly, obviously, those of us who have been in this dars from the beginning, to understand that the style in which we cover these topics is based on our foundation. We always lay the foundations first, and we lay them very clearly so that we can make sure that we understand where all the rulings are coming from. The basis of our understanding of the deen comes from the Quran and from the Sunnah. Here we have an ayah of the Quran from Surah Al-Ma'idah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lays that foundational principle for us on where we get the idea that food from the sea or seafood is permissible for consumption. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu mentions, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ صَيْدُ الْبَحْرِ وَطَعَامُهُ مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ وَلِلسَّيَّارَةِ وَحُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ صَيْدُ الْبَرِّ مَا دُمْتُمْ حُرُمًا وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي إِلَيْهِ تُحْشَرُونَ. So here Allah, this first part, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala essentially says to us, it is permissible for us to hunt or catch food from the sea, right, for the food of it. And this is the ayah that we needed as our basis. Allah essentially is telling us, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ صَيْدُ الْبَحْرِ. So now that we know this, that the food of the sea is permissible, this is the foundation for which we understand that seafood is acceptable. Now, the area where this gets a little contentious is in the understanding of which specific types of food. According to the Hanafi school, this Quranic verse is specifically referring to fish only, okay, and not everything in the sea. And the understanding of that comes from this hadith, actually, where Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, أحلت لنا ميتتان ودمان فأما الميتتان فالجراد والحوت وأن الدمان فالكبد والطحال. So this is a hadith of Abu Dawood and Ahmad, and Ibn Majah narrates it as well, that two types of dead meat and two types of blood have been made lawful for consumption. The two dead meat are fish and locusts, and the two types of blood are liver and spleen. So now going back to the original ayah, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ صَيْدُ الْبَحْرِ. So the food of the ocean is permissible for you, because here it says صَيْدُ الْبَحْرِ, the catch of the ocean, right? What you catch of the ocean. So the understanding that we have, and why we've taken this understanding that it means only fish, is because in this hadith, it further clarifies that what item from the ocean, right, is permissible. And then this hadith clarifies further these two types of dead meats, meaning two types of dead meat, two types of blood, which is al-jarad wal-hut. So fish specifically and locusts. So because that takhsis was made, that specification was made on fish for this ayah of the Quran in relation to the catch of the ocean, we then take the understanding to mean that the catch of the ocean specifically means fish and not everything in the ocean, as some of the respected mashayikh and the ulama in the other madhahib have taken to mean. And this is, of course, important to understand. Every school has their own understanding. The great mashayikh and the great scholars of the past have also come to their own conclusions, their own research for why that is. According to the Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali school, they interpret the Quranic verse to include all seafood. This is the point that I had made earlier. Anything found in the sea is halal. Now, like I again just earlier stated, further research is necessary to identify specifically if there's any areas that need further explanation, which items are okay, which items are not okay, etc. But generally, in order for us to understand, all the other madhahib have given permission to consuming all food items found from the sea. This would include octopus and calamari and clams and shellfish and lobsters and all of those items. Now, in the Hanafi madhab, that would not be permissible for consumption. This would be considered a impure food item, and we're going to discuss that next. But up until this point, it's very important for us to understand that when we're talking about the Hanafi school, the understanding is all the catch of the ocean, which is fish and considered fish, would be permissible for consumption. Part of that is, for example, eel. Eel is considered a type of fish. So therefore, to consume eel would be acceptable. Flounder. Flounder is also a type of fish, but those of you who know, it's a bottom feeder. That would still technically be a fish and would be acceptable for consumption. But now crayfish or crawfish, for example, lobster, for example, would not be acceptable according to the Hanafi school. And according to the other madhab, which you see on your screen as you see it on the slide, all the other madhabs give a general permission to all items under the sea. So we're just reiterating here. Now we're going to get into further clarification as to why does that classification or clarification point in the Hanafi school suggest that you cannot consume all non-fish animals from the ocean. Inshallah, we're going to cover that now. Now, this is one of the proofs that the other schools use. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال سأل رجل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال يا رسول الله إنا نركب البحر ونحمل معنا القليل من الماء فإن توضأنا به عطشنا أفنتوضأ بماء البحر فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم هو الطهور ماؤه الحل ميتته. So here we understand the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked a question by a man, and he says, "O Messenger of Allah, we travel on the sea and we take only a small quantity of water with us. If we use this water for wudu, we would suffer from thirst. So can we perform wudu with seawater?" So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded, "Its water is pure, and what dies in it is lawful food." So this would be one of the proofs for the other madhabs as to why it would be acceptable to eat anything found in the ocean. This is a proof for that, for those three other schools. And inshallah, we're going to cover why in the Hanafi school it is not acceptable or not okay to consume anything that comes from the ocean. It's exclusive to fish. Okay. So here, this is that category that we talked about, prawns and shrimp, as a potentially contentious category. And the reason for that is because there is an exception in the Hanafi school of other than fish, and that is prawns and shrimp. That there is some ikhtilaf with regards to, and a difference of opinion amongst the mashayikh and the scholars within the madhab, within the school, on whether or not shrimp or prawns are also acceptable to consume. But what's important is the question that we're asking specifically. Understanding the origins of the definition of fish goes back to how the mashayikh, how the Arabs used to traditionally classify an animal from the ocean as a fish. Okay, so this is why this is very important to understand. Do we consider fish, when we're classifying something as a fish, do we linguistically call it a fish? We just call anything from the ocean fish? Or, for example, is that just what's commonly known as a fish? Or do we look at like the biological anatomy of that fish and we see what is it scientifically classified as, and then we identify it? Oh, okay, this is a fish, for example, right? So this is how we would look at our understanding of fish, or how we would understand whether or not we would classify it as something acceptable or not. Okay. Ibn Abidin Shami, rahimahullah, the Hanafi jurist, says and further clarifies, only that which the Arabs considered fish is permitted from the produce of the sea. So this was the actual classification of what is considered fish. During the time of the Arabs living in the era of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, what they classified when they caught from the sea a fish, an item which is considered fish, would be acceptable for consumption. Now, this goes back to the understanding that it's not necessarily the biology of that animal which classifies it as a fish or not as a fish, but what was understood as a fish amongst the Arabs who lived during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and some of the later historians, later mashayikh, that what was considered a fish. Okay. Whereas other scholars will consider the biological nature of the creature. If they are fish, then they will be permissible regardless of what was held by previous scholars. This has been the case with the status of the prawn and shrimp. Okay. And so going back and forth, this has been sort of the big debate here, is in the understanding or the classification of what's considered a fish or what's not considered a fish. Further, Ibn Abidin states that the prohibition of other than fish from the produce of the sea is based on the general prohibition of vile things. So now understanding that, where did we get this idea that as in the Hanafi school, you cannot consume anything outside of fish from the catch of the sea? It comes, excuse me, it comes from the general prohibition in another ayah of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you should avoid, or that there's a prohibition in consuming things that are considered khaba'ith, that which is khabith, vile. Okay. And so this is the ayah. الذين يتبعون الرسول النبي الأمي الذي يجدونه مكتوبا عندهم في التوراة والإنجيل يأمرهم بالمعروف وينهاهم عن المنكر ويحل لهم الطيبات ويحرم عليهم الخبائث. Who makes good things lawful to them and bad things unlawful. And from this specific ayah, this classification of khaba'ith, those things classified as khabith or filthy or dirty things, all non-fish things fall under that category, with the exception of shrimp and prawns. Again, because of the classification of the Arabs, who at the time considered that shrimp and prawn was actually a type of fish. And so for that reason, based on their understanding of the animal, based on their understanding of the creature specifically, that it was not considered khabith. That's why the scholars are of the opinion that shrimp, and this is a 50-50 understanding, in the sense that there's ikhtilaf within the madhab, that some say that it is not permissible because it falls under this category. Shrimp and prawn fall under this category of khabith. Therefore, it will not be permissible to consume. And there are some scholars that take that opinion, whereas other scholars take the opinion of the earlier Arab scholars, who say that no, shrimp falls under the classification of fish. So just like the Arabs who lived during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the earlier mashayikh and the earlier scholars would classify shrimp as a type of fish, and everything other than that would be considered khabith, then there are some scholars from within the madhab that would then say shrimp and prawns are acceptable and permissible to consume. And so with regards to sort of what we should do then, or like what the next step would be, I would say personally, consult your local mufti and your local scholar, and with whatever opinion sort of you feel most comfortable with, after taking mashwara with your local mufti and scholar, then you should take that opinion with regards to this as well. But the overall point or takeaway from here is that the reasoning for why some scholars are of the opinion that it's acceptable or some are of the opinion that it's not is in the classification, whether or not that shrimp is considered fish or not considered fish. So I hope that answers that question, and hopefully sheds some light to that topic. And of course, this is a discussion that could go into a lot of detail, that further classification, the zoology, or like the anatomy or the biology of that creature, every creature individually, and then discussing that. Of course, that discussion can be had, but for the sake of time, inshallah, hopefully we'll suffice on those points, and inshallah we'll continue on to the next part in our series, which is to discuss the practical implications on our life, our children, and our iman, inshallah. Okay. Okay. So of course, this is the last section. And this section, the objective really is to change things up a bit. It's not going to be as technical like in the 3 previous slides, classes, where we talked a lot about details and technical things relating to fiqh and all this sort of stuff. This is the implications of all of that after having learned all those things, right? Let's just go look at this slide. Look at number 1. We looked at definitions. We looked at the spiritual implications and the effect, modern misconceptions and misunderstandings of halal. Then we went into ingredients and we talked about all of those ingredients. Then number 3, we talked about all the various slaughtering types and methods. Now we just talked about seafood. All of those areas, they're so important in the life of a person who's concerned about halal consumption, because they all have to do with what you put into your body. Now we're talking about, after having learned all that, what am I supposed to do with that information? What world am I living in? What kind of a world can I potentially live in? What's the potential of the world that I can live in with all this information? Is it practical for halal to be in my part of my every single day life? Is it something which is exclusive to a special occasion? You know, how popular is halal in the first place? Okay. And that's inshallah what we intend to cover. And oftentimes the problem is we don't really realize this because it's not our fault. We don't know this, but we lose sight of how big of a deal halal is. Okay. Consuming it being part of our lives, in the industry of halal. And as well, it's very important to understand a lot of things also can come as a result of that. Okay, so I want to just take a moment and go over this first slide to further clarify how we're going to discuss this or what we're going to cover, inshallah. So we're going to cover certification bodies, right? This includes organizations that their sole objective is to try to verify as a third-party audit the food that we're consuming, the ingredients that exist in various products. What else? So ingredients, food products, to stop halal deception and fraud taking place. So on multiple levels, the work that these organizations are doing is absolutely phenomenal. Now, obviously, it's not exclusive to just one or two organizations, as you can clearly see here. There's Sanha, HMC, HMA, Hafsa, Jakim. Some of these names you've probably never heard of, which is okay. And that's what we're going to cover today. The second area is how to verify if someone says, brother, it's halal, therefore you should trust my word. And, you know, someone said I read something last night that was pretty shocking. Someone said that when someone utters something about their food being halal, it is like the curse of Allah on the person who questions him. I said, wow, that's a very powerful statement to make, that if someone just says that my food is halal, you have to blindly trust that person no matter what. And you have to eat what they say, and you cannot question that it is considered the greatest sin amongst the top sins that exist for you to question whether a person says their food is halal or not. And we're going to discuss that as well. Corporate deception, how these mega giant companies are deceiving many individuals, or maybe not directly, but indirectly, we're all being duped, okay, because of the ingredients they put into their products and none of us know about. And lastly, what we could have, what could we look forward to if we actually were unified in our cause and our need for having a unified program, or a unified need, intention, a desire that we all want the things discussed in this presentation over the past 4 classes. We all want this. We have 50, 60, 70, 200, 500, 1,000, 5,000 individuals that come together and say, yeah, I think that eating halal food is important. I think having a savings account that 50 years down the line, after I've worked 50 years in my life, all of my children no longer have to be financially in need because I've taken care of them. I have a savings account saved for them. I think that's worth saving for. I think that having an Islamic school for my children to grow up going to is worth putting money into. I think having a nice house that I've purchased so that my children never have to worry about having a home is worth investing into. And also, I think that 5 years down the line, when my small children grow up, 15 years down the line, when my children get older and they start their own families and their own lives, that they're also preserving their iman and not eating haram food and not consuming products that are, doubtful or impermissible, or that it's, kind of halal, or we don't know. Why not set up a system now, put the time and the investment now, so that 10 years and 15 years down the line, you're eating halal food would be as simple as just saying, where do you want to go to eat today? And is that too far-fetched of an idea? Inshallah, we'll cover hopefully all of that with the time allotted. So let's start actually with the corporate deception. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this particular slide, but it's important for us to understand the way companies work when it comes to their ingredients. Companies change ingredients in their products without notice, for the most part, not because they have an anti-Muslim agenda, but because they're constantly looking for the most efficient, cheap, and easily accessible product to swap into their food. A great example of this is Frito-Lay. Frito-Lay owns pretty much all the chips, famous chips companies that we're familiar with. They change their products, their ingredients actually, on average every 2 to 3 months. So your standard bag of hot Cheetos, the ingredients on there will change roughly every 2 to 3 months for a cheaper product that's cheaper for Frito-Lay to produce en masse and then put into their product. So this happened a few years ago, I think close to 8 or 9 years ago, where Frito-Lay for a very, very short run had their Cheetos Puffs, the famous Cheetos Puffs, for one production run, their chips were okay. Now, mind you, this just happened serendipitously. It happened very randomly, where someone verified during one specific product run that lasted 3 months that the ingredients and the cheeses and everything checked out, had no animal byproducts, and it was totally fine. But the problem here is those ingredients change every shift, every production run. So every 3 months, those ingredients change, but no one is notified. Now, the sad thing is, in the community, word got out that that production run on those Cheetos Puffs are okay. What ends up happening? Everyone starts telling everyone. Everyone starts eating it. Now, what you cannot tell the difference is if you go to your local 7-Eleven or your Lucky's or Safeway, you don't know which production run are those chips from on the shelf. Are they from that 3-month window, or is it from 3 months before that or 3 months after that? It is extremely hard to tell. Okay. Most of the time, people will never verify that. Sit there and read the label and try to verify within which, production run window was it from. People don't often do that. So this was a major issue that had come up, that for quite some time, people were consuming this. It was almost a year. It actually lasted almost a year, until the rumors really died out, etc. So this is one thing that's really important. It's a type of corporate deception because companies are constantly looking to change their ingredients. And they're not just sitting there having to call you and letting you know that, hey, we're going to change our ingredients. So it's really terrifying that if you're out there eating a product and you don't know what's in it, and then you think, it's no big deal, we have to be considerate of our own iman. We have to be considerate of what we put into our own bodies. And we have to verify the ingredients. Chocolate chip cookies at Food Max, at Safeway, all these places, it's very convenient and very cheap to buy a bulk pack of 64 cookies and, at like $3.69. It's extremely cheap. But those ingredients in there are constantly changing, So it's extremely important. That's just one area I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. And of course, there's no obligation for any of these companies to have to notify anyone or to tell anybody, and like I had mentioned, it's virtually impossible to tell from which date of that production run those chips or those cookies came from. It's very arduous work. It's very, very difficult to constantly go back in and verify. And even if someone were to do that, it's a full-time job. It's an absolute full-time job for one individual to sit there every week, essentially, and call the company and ask for any changes. And if there was changes, to find out from which production run. Then not only to find out which production run, which of your retailers picked it up from that production run and has it reached the stores yet. It is so layered and so complicated that it makes you just want to say, forget that altogether. I don't even want to go through with all that. So you can definitely see here how it can be very frustrating and very, very technical for one person, right, for a whole company, matter of fact, let alone one person, to try to do all this verification on ingredients, on packaging, and various chips and drinks and cookies, etc. Now we're going to kind of talk about some of the certification bodies. And I think this is really important that we understand this, okay? That we understand this and we understand this really well. A certification body or an organization exists for the most part purely for the sake of verifying the meat that we consume, the sauces that we put into our food, the ingredients, the dry and wet ingredients that we use in our food, so that we make sure that there's no haram ingredients in them. A very good example, one organization certification body had their inspectors do an inspection on a facility and found that they were selling barbecue sauce. You might be thinking, well, okay, and what's the issue with barbecue sauce? Well, for the most part, nothing, except this giant, 2-liter or 2-gallon jug of barbecue sauce had red wine in the ingredients. Now, definitely that facility did not double check, right? Because they just thought it says barbecue sauce, it's cheap, it's in a 2-gallon jug. I'm going to take this, it's convenient for my restaurant. But when you don't have a certification body to verify these things, to double check these things, this is the exact type of mistake you'll make. Another facility was using white wine in one of their vinegars. Not their vinegars, one of their other sauces. It was a sauce. It was white wine. And they had, right there, was clear. They weren't even trying to hide it. But the point is that certification bodies are a great assistance to our Muslim community, to our restaurants, to our slaughterhouses, to our manufacturers, to those people who do baking and cooking. This is a great asset. The reason why is because we already do this on an individual basis. We check our ingredients to the best of our ability. We call the company to see if there's any wine and the rice and the whatever. So we try to do that ourselves already. But where we fail individually, these organizations have the absolute mastery and skill to provide that service to our community. So, for example, many people are against this idea of a certification body. The reason for that is they say high levels of cost, we don't need them, who are they, why won't you trust me? And that's fine. And we can make those arguments. And inshallah, we'll break down why those arguments don't make any sense. And as a community, to grow, in order to actually grow as a Muslim community, to have this great standard applied universally so that we can all be free of worry of what we're consuming, right? We absolutely have to have a third-party audit. So we're going to cover some of them nationally and internationally, so that we can see that this isn't an issue exclusively to the Bay Area. HMA, we'll start with these great guys. HMA, the Halal Monitoring Authority, based out of Canada, is an organization that was established based on the need that the Jamiyat of the Ulama, a body of scholars, got together and realized that, hey, there's a lot of halal fraud taking place in Canada. There are issues coming up where people don't know about ingredients. People don't know about slaughter methods. The ulama even go to the slaughterhouses and point out, hey, you guys are killing the animals wrong. Hey, this animal's not even dead. Hey, you're processing all these things wrong. Hey, you're including ingredients in drinks that come from crushed beetles. We don't think that's okay as Muslims. And they're saying, we don't care. We're going to say it's halal anyways, and we're going to sell it. So the mashayikh got together and the scholars got together and they established this organization, HMA, in Canada, in order to go in and to create a standard gold standard that people can look for as certification, that these group of scholars got together to verify that these products, this restaurant, this slaughterhouse, meet that standard which all Muslims can consume those products. Okay. Now, this has been around, HMA in Canada has been around for a very long time, coming close to 30 years now, I think. And the point is that this is a great service for the members of, for those who are in Canada. Why? Because there's an organization you could place your trust in to take care of all of those verification needs. Okay. It takes the doubt out of the program, of you trying to verify it yourself, of you trying to research it yourself. Our so many of our friends ask all the time, well, is this ingredient okay? They call their local scholar, they call their local mufti sab. And the reality is most people don't know about ingredients, and that's fine. But when there is, and this is an Islamic concept, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, that ask the people of knowledge who know if you don't know about something. And not everybody's going to inevitably know about all of the ingredients at the back of a bag of chips. Not everybody's going to know about various slaughter methods. Not every scholar is going to know about every single subject when it comes to this. So when an organization verified by scholars does exist, why shouldn't we support that organization? Even if we see differently with them, we give them our feedback and we give them our thoughts so that they can improve and they can get better, so that we collectively as a community grow. Okay. Now that was HMA. This is HMC in UK, all right, from England. So Halal Monitoring Committee. This is HMC, and HMC's goals were the same. Essentially, it's the same concept, it's the same idea. It's a non-for-profit organization established purely for the sake of the verification and the validation of halal products in the UK. And again, it's the idea across the board. Everyone has the same concern. We don't know what's happening out in the food world, and we need assistance, we need support. So who's going to be able to do that for us? The scholars will. So they've established an organization, they train individuals, and they get together and they provide that service. Okay. Now, Jakim. Jakim is based out of Malaysia, Indonesia, and they have a far spread. So Jakim is probably one of the oldest halal certifiers that exist. They've been around since the early 90s. And basically the goal of Jakim in Malaysia, Indonesia, is the same, except one major difference. Jakim is started with the same concept of having a halal verification organization that has audits, that sends inspectors out, that have people go out, do inspections randomly, verifying invoices, cross-checking that with the distributors, the individuals who sell the products, to meet with all these people so that the ingredients, the dry ingredients, the wet ingredients, the meats, the sauces, the distributor, the driver, the slaughterhouse, all aspects from farm to fork are verified by these scholars, by these auditors. This was the objective of all of these certifying agencies, okay, from the ones that I've listed. The difference is when Jakim started, that's how it originally started, except since Malaysia and Indonesia is a Muslim country, they were able to get their halal certification body as part of the government, which means that this is a government organization now, which is unbelievable, which is quite phenomenal, actually. So now, right, Jakim certification in Malaysia, Indonesia means that you cannot function on a government level unless your product is halal certified. Now, what does that further mean? That means that McDonald's, that means that Subway in Malaysia have to be Jakim certified in order for it to even function in the country. Think about that. You can't open up a restaurant if you want it to be halal unless you go through Jakim certification. And if you want to sell haram, specifically pork in Malaysia, you need to get a separate certificate that allows you to sell haram there. So that's the sort of power of the halal certification, that unified authority, that unified power that puts all of its efforts together to ensure, right, on a community level, on a government level, to ensure that their products are okay for consumption, then it gets to a government level, then it gets so powerful that a multi-billion-dollar organization like McDonald's can't open without your certification. These things are not far-fetched. These ideas are not crazy ideas, but it all starts with this base level of understanding what is the outcome or the future of our concern for halal today. Inshallah, we're going to cover that in a little bit as well. And then there's Hafsa. Many of us are familiar with Hafsa because it's originally from the Bay Area. The organization started here. The organization has spread across the country, now is one of the leading halal certifying bodies in the nation, in America today. And the goal of Hafsa, of course, same concept, same idea, started by mashayikh and scholars. The whole purpose is to ensure that the consumer is consuming a halal product, that there is no deception, that the idea is that from farm to fork, everything you consume is halal. That's the overall goal. That's the underlying theme of the organization and the overall goal. The purpose all boils down to that, with random inspections, with inspections taking place once a week. All of this is the actual goal of the organization. Now, again, what's very important to understand is that there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of individuals have a lot of disagreements with, okay? There's so much work that has been done, research, development, specifically with Hafsa, traveling across the country, traveling across the world to multiple countries, checking out other places, facilities, how they do their inspections, how they do their slaughtering processes, doing continuous research to verify which slaughterhouses in America and Canada and across the world have verifiably acceptable slaughter methods, which ingredients are okay, which ingredients are not okay. It's a full-time program. It's a full-time job. And that there needs to be individuals who are dedicated to this. We here living in the Bay Area specifically, but in America are blessed to have an organization like Hafsa who does all that work, who does that back-end work, that back-end research, has scholars who are putting out articles, doing lectures, doing talks, doing programs, education, to fulfill that void for us so that we don't have that issue of not knowing where we can eat or what ingredients are okay or what ingredients are not okay. And lastly, I want to mention from the certification bodies, SANHA. Now, the SANHA is one of the more amazing organizations, again, established also for quite some time. The idea behind SANHA is that it's a certification based in South Africa, and their goals are exactly the same, except for the fact that SANHA is significantly bigger, it's developed. They have inspections multiple times a day. One of the largest slaughterhouses, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in South Africa, chicken slaughterhouses, is run by Muslims, to the extent that, and I can verify this as well, that they're almost the majority of chicken in South Africa is hand slaughtered by a Muslim, to the point to where you have to go out of your way to find haram chicken to consume, because the large manufacturers and the producers of chicken are mostly hand slaughtered. That's unbelievable, but that's not a far-fetched idea or a concept for you and I to consider for ourselves here in the US. Why? Because that same concept is already happening. It's been happening for 10 years. One of the largest producers of chicken, right, in America is already doing hand slaughtered, and that's already available, okay? So the idea is that these few certification bodies that I mentioned, right, all across the world, so whatever, I was going to just go over the list, but these few organizations across the world, their goals and their job is all really the same. They want to provide the best quality product moving forward with the gold standard of halal verified with this certification, to prove and to show with the utmost certainty that we are trying our best as a community, as an organization, to provide these services so that the consumer eats only authentically halal food. Now, there are some misconceptions, and we can clarify that at a later time. But just briefly, people constantly talk about how there's no need for this. There's no need for a certification. There's no need for an organization to come around and tell us what's halal and what's not halal. And truly, I personally believe this is one of the most disappointing sentiments that we have as a Muslim community. Maybe this is our arrogance, but I don't want to speak out of place. But the reality is that as a community, if we knew that we could potentially have the potential to get a McDonald's certified or In-N-Out or a Subway or whatever, why do we need to get to that point only before it draws interest? Multiple instances have existed where, and inshallah, we're going to discuss this in just a couple slides, the opportunity came about that Facebook, as big of an organization as it is, to have all the Facebook campuses in Menlo Park, which is, where the main Facebook office is, to have all of their kitchens halal certified. But Muslims from amongst themselves felt that we don't need anyone to tell us what's considered halal or not. We don't need a certification body. And that single-handedly jeopardized the opportunity for Muslims to have halal food at Facebook. Now, someone might say, well, why does that matter? It matters because there are hundreds of Muslims that work in tech, thousands of Muslims. And there is full restaurants at these large companies that provide food. But as Muslims, because we can't eat any of that food, right? We had the opportunity to provide and have made available for us halal options. So anyways, that's one very specific example. And inshallah, we'll get into a few more. But this is just the reason why I'm sharing why it doesn't make sense for us to be against this idea. It actually benefits us significantly more. And we'll go over some examples of where it's worked before. So before we reach that, I want to also address this point, which is kind of silly, unfortunately, but a very real concern and a real dilemma. We have heard this point probably time and time again. Trust me, I'm a Muslim, okay? Culturally, and I say this culturally because we've been indoctrinated to believe that there is no permission for a person to ask another person if their meat is halal, if their meat is, hand slaughtered, if it's dhabiha, if it's slaughtered by hand, right? By asking this question, it's almost as if you've cursed out another person, okay? The person who, where originally this came from was, I had heard a discussion and basically two people got into a very large argument because of this exact point. I later realized this is a lot more common than I thought. And to essentially ask another person's whether or not their food is hand slaughtered or not is considered a great, great problem, okay? And the argument is that you can't ask a Muslim that, because if a Muslim says my food is halal, you can't doubt that. Now, I've done about a day's worth of research, so I'm sure I could still be wrong here. But I have yet to find anything from an Islamic point of view that says if a Muslim says his food is halal, you have to stay quiet and you cannot doubt that and you have to eat their food. I've done only about a day's worth of research and I have yet to find anything that states that claim. Rather, I found research to state the complete opposite of that claim, which is al-aslu fil ashya'i al-ibaha. And I had shared this actually in the last week's slide on slaughtering methods, which is the original rule with regards to food items is permissibility. This only applies to non-meat items. Meaning, if you were invited to someone's house and they offer you some cookies, you eat those cookies, no questions asked, you're fine. But when it comes to meat, that does not apply, because there was a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and a person who went and he hunted. And essentially the summary is that rule with meat is that you verify first before you consume. So the second point, the sin is on them if they're wrong. They said it's halal, so the sin is on them. while I cannot say that the sin is on them or on whoever, what we can say is that the spiritual effects is on you. That's for sure. And I think it's very important that we take ourselves and our iman very seriously, right? Well, it says halal. Yeah, but you've learned all of these things in this presentation over 4 classes. It doesn't matter if it says it's halal. You need to take that extra step to verify, right? And also, just to be extra clear here, when someone says that their food is halal, it's not that you're denying or suggesting that they're lying, but it's because so much halal fraud exists in America. Products are mislabeled as halal. Other things are labeled as halal and they're haram. Animals are being shot in the face with a shotgun and people are labeling that as halal. That it's very, very possible that the person who you're eating the meat from does not actually know. That's how bad the halal fraud has gotten in America. That's really what the argument is. So it's not an argument about whether or not, I believe you would sell me haram food. No, I think you're a wonderful guy and I think your iman is excellent. But it's just that I don't trust the industry. It's not that I don't trust you. I don't trust what is happening in America today with halal food. That's what I don't trust. It's not that I don't trust you. And I hope that there's no shock and awe when I ask this question to people. Now, I'm not saying anybody to go try this because you will definitely see people very much in shock and awe if you were to ask them if their meat's halal. Now, that's not the right question anyways. You don't ask that question. Rather, you ask, for a verification certificate, if their food product is hand slaughtered or not. That would be a better way to go about it. But my point is that asking this question immediately induces a type of fear, panic response from people. That you think I'm not a Muslim? You think I would sell haram food? Right? Once I had this discussion with somebody, and the very next day he put a humongous poster outside of his store. He says, "I'll give $50,000 to anyone who can prove that I'm not halal." And this is an incorrect approach, correct? This is a very incorrect understanding of that discussion. Because again, the point is that I'm not saying you're serving haram food. I'm asking a question out of curiosity whether or not this product is hand slaughtered or not. Okay. So these are the responses. That number one, there's no basis to that religious claim that you cannot ask a Muslim whether or not his meat is hand slaughtered or not, or his meat is, halal verified or not. Number two, the sin is on the individual, maybe for the deception, but the influence of the haram is also upon you. Okay. If you consume something which was not acceptable, then that sin, not the sin, but the spiritual effects does fall upon you. Okay. Yeah, I apologize for that. So number three, there's no need to be surprised by the questioning of a product when the objective is one and the same. Again, the idea is that I'm not attacking a person personally. Rather, I'm just trying to find out for my own sake. And if we can't have a civil conversation or a discussion about a product, then this makes it very, very difficult for anybody to consume anything, right? And I think, of course, hikmah and wisdom goes into effect here. How you approach someone, how do you ask that question? And number four, this is the main takeaway, really. We are living in a non-Muslim country. Deceptive practices are everywhere. No one is safe. No one is free from it. It's one of those things where we have to just understand it. It exists. It will not go away. We have to know more than anybody else that, well, unfortunately, the reality is that we don't know this, and that's why it comes as a shock. But that's why we're doing classes like this, so that we get to know and we learn actually a little bit about this. The reality is that there are people mislabeling products. There are people labeling, certain drinks, that flavorful drinks, as halal, and there's wine in them. There are people labeling products, meat products that were shot in the face with a shotgun, as halal, and there's a label on them. Deceptive practices do exist. How would a person verify that? How would a random person verify if their meat was shot in the face by a shotgun or not, or slaughtered by hand by a Muslim, or, sawn off by an electric blade? How would any random person have that information? The reality is that we wouldn't, but rather an organization whose full focus and job is to do that research is the best person to turn to, is the best resource for us to turn to. Okay. So now this is the sort of, I wanted to end on like a more positive, lighter note, but here's what we could have. Okay. As a community, as a society, as an active, young, vibrant Muslim community who has money, mashallah, who has education, who has opportunity, who lives in some of the greatest cities, right? Large areas, large cities, companies, where opportunity essentially is just waiting. It's low-hanging fruit for us to just go and pick right up. This is what you and I could have. Number one, for those who are unaware, imagine having a buffet to go to, a huge buffet to go to, and all the food there is halal certified. You pay your entrance fee, you go in, and everything inside of this extremely large buffet is halal certified. You get that option at NYU's Lipton Hall near Washington Square. This is amazing, okay? This is quite amazing. The university, NYU, right, in New York, in Manhattan, has a dining hall. They have multiple dining halls, but one of their largest dining halls, called Lipton Hall, got halal certified by Hafsa. And now the Muslim students, as well as, of course, everybody else, are able to eat real food: roast beef, turkey slices, sandwiches, drinks, desserts, coffees, cakes, pastries, everything that you can think of, and it's halal and halal certified. And they have a halal inspector who's there 24/7 to make sure every product that comes in and every product that goes out is halal verified. Imagine for those of us who go to college, imagine for those of us who went to university, if our dining halls were halal. Well, you pay part of your tuition for that anyways, and yet you can't even eat that. You go to your school's dining hall, you buy a meal plan. What are you going to eat? Macaroni and salad all day long? No meat? It's unbelievable. Unbelievable that as Muslims living in the 2022, our kids have gone to college. Our kids have gone to university. They're living there 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. If they do a master's and a PhD, 5 years, 6 years, they're living in these dorms, in these colleges, and they can't eat halal food. NYU is a perfect example of why, if we demand it, we can have it. Okay. So at NYU, yes, Lipton Hall is only one of the certified places. They have 2 more certified dining areas, one in Brooklyn, and then one, I think, also in Manhattan, another one they have as well. That means 3 in one university. So look at it this way. College campuses is just one area. If we had all our college campuses, now, of course, we're in California. Now let's talk about California and the options that we have here. In California, we have the UC system: UC Davis, UC Berkeley, UC Santa Cruz, and then all the folks in Southern California: UC Irvine, UCLA, UC San Diego. All of these opportunities, and if the MSA of those schools got together and said, hey, we're sick and tired of paying for tuition, living across the state, right, away from home, away from home-cooked meal, why can't we also have a halal dining option on campus? We absolutely can have one, but we just need to be able to push for that and get that. Why can't NYU have one develop, but we can't here have it on the West Coast. Looking at it from a company point of view, our companies, right? Businesses, PayPal, Facebook, whatever other 100, Apple, all these tech companies have huge kitchens in the company. You never even have to leave your job. You just go down to the hall. And yet we as Muslims, despite the fact that thousands of Muslims probably work there, hundreds of Muslims work there, on each campus, we are not yet pushing for a unified body to have Hafsa come in and certify that dining hall, to have that facility available to us. Okay. Fast food organizations. I shared the story of Jakim. In Jakim, you can go to McDonald's there and it's all certified, verified halal. How do you get to that point? By demanding that, by not allowing that restaurant to succeed, or for that restaurant to come here into your community without your, without your demand, without your sort of needs or wants. Okay. Nationwide halal is attainable. Getting certified products nationwide is accessible. We just need to want it bad enough. Because as a community, one of the things that we are suffering the most from is that we're very scattered. And as a result of the fact that we are very scattered, we find that our halal products are also scattered. We don't know what's okay and we don't know what's not okay. We also don't have a unified body that has support from the community so that we can make those decisions and put pressure on those companies to provide a halal alternative, to provide halal options, right? In-N-Out is here in California. It's from here. Imagine if there was a halal In-N-Out option. And no, In-N-Out's not halal, but imagine if there was one. It would be unbelievable. But the demand, if there was enough Muslims to push for it, we could definitely see some potential changes. Okay. When the demand is created, then all of these options, facilities, they're all going to be accessible. Think about the future you want for your children. Think about where we've come today, right? I went to a slaughterhouse where they slaughtered from 11 p.m. at night till 5 o'clock in the morning. Hundreds of thousands of chickens were slaughtered by hand. The name of Allah was taken. Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. That did not exist 10 years ago. That did not exist 10 years ago. And here we are, one slaughterhouse is providing chicken essentially for all of America. Hand slaughtered, verifiable chicken to all of America. And it is all right as Muslims that we should demand halal food. We should demand that our companies provide a halal alternative, especially these large multi-billion-dollar organizations. Google and Apple and Tesla and all these, why should they not provide a halal kitchen to their employees? Why not? It's not difficult for them. It's not like they don't have the money for them, right? One time I was speaking to a company and I found out that they already have a contract with a very large halal supplier. It's just that they never had demand to actually order the product. It blows my mind. But this is why it's so important for those of us who work in tech, for those of us who work in these companies, who work at the university level, we should get organized and unified. Now, again, here in the Bay Area in America, we have Hafsa. We should reach out to our local representatives. We should reach out to the organization to try to see how we can facilitate that for our own future, for our own growth. And lastly, I'll end with this. Not all of these organizations, right? HMA, HMC, Sanha, Hafsa, Jakim, these are not, no one is making the claim that they are 100% guaranteed to be, bulletproof, that they're absolutely can never go wrong. No, the claim is that these are organizations that we know that are working with scholars to provide a service, and that service has provided the community with the assistance that they've needed over the course of many years. And with further community support, we can actually get a lot further as well. So I actually implore everyone and encourage everyone to deeply, deeply consider supporting these organizations that exist, learning more about the work that they do, and allowing us to be unified, because the future of halal in America can go either one of two ways. Either we wake up and we're genuinely concerned and we say, you know what, I want to make an effort. I want to do something about it. I want to be part of that and bring about that change. Or we can sit back and say, it is what it is. And we allow it to just take its course. So with that being said, inshallah, I'll go ahead and stop here. I want to thank everyone for joining me and being here for the 4 classes. Inshallah, we'll open it up to some Q&A. But just before that, I want to make a few more announcements on behalf of the madrasa, inshallah. So I'll make these announcements first, and then we can stop for Q&A. We have a few classes that we're starting, inshallah, on behalf of the madrasa, since this class is over. Actually, I think this one's first. Yeah. Actually, so I'll mention this. First and foremost, the Nur al-Ida class, Fiqh of Charity, Fasting, and Hajj by Mawlana Abdullah Rashid is starting Tuesdays, February 1st to June 7th from 8 to 9:15. So the same times that we had these classes. It's a free class, so please share it with as many people as possible, learning about sadaqah, fasting, zakat, hajj. This is extremely important. So I implore you all to please take advantage of this. Share this with others, take this information down. Additionally, interacting with the hadith series. This is with Sheikh Hashim Ahmad, who is my teacher of hadith. An amazing human, amazing individual. If you have not met him or taken a class with him, I strongly encourage you do so. This will be beginning, so Monday, January 31st. It was tonight, actually, was the first dars, but that's no problem. We can, of course, continue from the following weeks to Monday, June 6th. So it's a very long series. Every Monday from 6 to 7:15. This class does have a fee. There's a registration link as well, tinyurl.com/hadith1sf. And on the last class, The Way of the Worshipper, Minhaj al-Abidin. This is every Wednesday, so this is Wednesday, February 2nd to Wednesday, June 7th. Wednesdays from 6 to 7. This also has a fee. You can register at tinyurl.com/minhajps. Okay, so I strongly encourage everyone to please do consider these new classes, these series. These are excellent series, inshallah. So we'll go ahead and stop here. Anyone who needs to leave, of course, can leave, but we'll go ahead and take a few moments to take any of the questions that might come up. Jazakumullahu khairan. So with regards to crab and lobster, it was not considered fish, according to the Hanafi school, according to the understanding of what is fish. So therefore, that's why crab and lobster is not acceptable for consumption in the Hanafi school. Yeah, absolutely. So a question came about, what action items can you give us to advocate for halal in our organizations, communities, universities, etc.? I would certainly say the most important thing that you can do is to reach out to Hafsa, the organization that I mentioned earlier, because they have a greater understanding of these things. They've worked with it in the past. Let me see if I can give you their contact info. I'll give you an email, as a matter of fact. Email directly, and that's one great way to do so, because they can help you work together to provide resources to ultimately get to the point to where you can then provide either a halal kitchen, a halal option, working with the university, working with the job site, working with all these facilities or these places in order to bring that on site. Because remember, the fear is mostly internalized fear, but it's not a fear of whether or not the company could do it or not do it. If there's just a little bit of demand from these companies, from these universities, they realize that this is something they have to provide. And especially with this world of, being culturally sensitive and being, working with minorities and things like that, this is something which can easily be done, and people are willing to do so. Number two, all the previous classes, are they recorded? If so, where can I find them? Inshallah, they will be accessible very soon. We'll probably send out an email with information on how to access the rest of the classes. Most likely it'll be on the website, so duaseminary.org. Inshallah, it should be there. But if not, inshallah, stay, we have all your emails. Inshallah, we'll send out an email to let everybody know once this final class is completed, where to find the remaining recordings, inshallah. Another question. 1 second. What's the difference between Zabiha certification and all these other halal certification entities, or is it the same thing? So I'm not sure very specifically who you're referring to, but yes, there does exist a ton of certifying bodies that exist in America. Not everyone has the same goals in mind. Not everyone has the same objectives. Not everyone is doing the same thing. And unfortunately, sometimes part of the problem exists from people who have their own personal labels or private labels, or this is where the fraud exists sometimes. So that's why it's important to verify by scholars that are reliable, that have been verified from the community or the community. It's extremely important to verify which organizations to trust. And the halal certificates, so the Zabiha stamps or certificates that you see, these organizations provide a certification to verify that this restaurant or this place has been verified by this organization, and they have inspectors or they have an entire process in place. And that's kind of the goal. That's kind of the idea behind it. And that's what you're getting. That certificate is an identifiable piece to showcase that this organization has been verified, or scholars have visited, or inspectors have been there, etc. So it's to give further confidence in the consumer, knowing that this place matches all of those standards that we would all like to see and hope for. Okay. So a lot of the terminology is very odd, as a matter of fact. So a question came in that, what do you do if a product says Zabiha halal slaughtered, machine slaughtered on it? So that's very confusing, because remember what we talked about in the first class about definitions. Halal, all halal means is that it's permissible, right? This can include anything, food or non-food, that it's permissible. Now, under that umbrella definition of halal, meaning permissible, there's dhabiha. Dhabiha literally just means slaughtered. But when we are talking about dhabiha in regards to slaughter, what type of slaughter is that? It's hand slaughtered. So, and this is where a lot of the gimmicks and the fraudulent practices and the games come from, because obviously someone's going to read zabiha and they're going to think that that means hand slaughtered. But what was the person who put that label on that box thinking? Well, zabiha literally means just cut. So I'll just say just cut. So he'll put zabiha on the box because literally it just means to cut, right? But of course, now a person who's a practicing Muslim who eats zabiha slaughtered meat understands that that means no, not just cut anyway, cut by hand with the name of Allah taken. And the problem, unfortunately, is that in America, there's no real laws against this type of deceptive practices. And so that's why it's so difficult, really, truly, to find a product that you can just look at and be like, okay, I'm going with that, without a type of third-party audit. Now, again, it becomes difficult to explain all this unless a person really goes out into the halal industry, slaughterhouses, and sees it firsthand, all the types of deception that takes place, unfortunately. But the reality is that's where we are today. It's just, as much as we want to argue it, that's where we are today. And so therefore, when an organization comes up and says, hey, we're going to try to clarify this, and then they receive a ton of heat as a result from people saying, hey, who are you to tell us what's okay and not okay? This is where it gets all mumbled and jumbled and confusing for everybody, unfortunately. But khair, inshallah, if there's no other questions, we'll try to answer this last question, and then after that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So pigskin items would not be halal. A jacket, a purse, no, it would not be okay, even if it's the skin of it, because tanned or like tanned items, hide of an animal like a pig is still haram, right? That's not something which is like some other animal, like let's just say a bear. A bear is haram. You can't eat bear. But if you skin it and tan it, you can wear a bear fur coat, right? Or bear carpet. It would be okay. But with pig, nothing of the pig is ever okay. Is it halal to touch a pig, dead or alive? I don't know that it's haram to touch it, but it would be najis. So you'd have to wash your hands. Yeah. So khair, inshallah, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Jazakumullah khairan to everyone. I pray that this dars was effective and informative and helpful. Inshallah, I ask everyone to make dua for me and for the madrasa. I do encourage everyone to please participate in the future classes from the madrasa. And inshallah ta'ala, hopefully we can provide more of these classes and series in the near future. Again, jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.